In this video, I'm going to do what I like to call my Proxmox checkup, a manual check in the Proxmox web interface and a little bit of terminal use to see what's going on with the system and see if there's any possible hardware or software issues to take a note of. While automated alerts are great for getting alerted immediately when something starts having an issue, I think it's still a good idea to manually look over a system like this every once in a while to make sure your alerting system didn't miss anything and that there's no other problems or issues that it's going on with the system that you should take action on before they get worse. I'm going to be doing most things in this video in the Proxmox web interface, but you can do almost all of this as well in the terminal if you want to script it as well. So let's dive into the interface now. This is one of my personal Proxmox servers, so it's kind of running okay, but there's some oddities on the system as well to hopefully demonstrate what a real-life system would look like. The first thing I'm going to start with is this bottom section here with all the different Proxmox tasks from the last day or two. The first thing I'm going to notice is anything that's red or yellow that has a warning or error. And I'm going to notice I have some backup jobs that have had some problems. This Proxmox VE system is supposed to back up to a PBS server, but my PBS server spends some time shut down, so all of these are explained by me and I know what's going on here. But it should have been running for this one, so I'm going to take a look at what's going on here. Looking at the error, the next thing I take a notice is I notice that my mail to root has errors here. So in addition to my backups not working, I also have some mailing issues and likely want to make sure that my notifications email is also set up correctly. So I'm going to take a note of both of those things here. And other than that, it looks like some of these backup jobs ran correctly. There was some background updates of the package database that ran fine and some shells. I'm also looking for if there's anything abnormal that I don't remember doing, just to make sure nothing weird's going on with this box. The next place I'm going to take a look at on my server is the left-hand column here, which shows all my different servers and the VMs and the storage on them. I'm going to mostly be dealing with a single cluster in this video, but if you have multiple nodes in a cluster, I'd immediately check to see if everything's online with the little check marks. Typically, a Proxmox cluster wants to have all of its nodes running all of the time, so if something's off, I'd try to get it online if it wasn't intentional. The next thing I'm going to just take a look at is all the VMs to see which ones are running and which ones aren't. Proxmox can inadvertently kill VMs, or sometimes you can accidentally shut them down and realize they're not running when they should have been running. So I'd immediately take a note and make sure that nothing's running that shouldn't be running, and nothing's not running that should be running. Sometimes it might be nice to use the little note tags for always running VMs so you can know which VMs that should be running aren't actually running, because sometimes Proxmox kills a VM and just doesn't tell or notify you very well. I'm now going to move down and look at storage. The first thing I'm going to look for is anything with this little question mark, which means it can't access it. And it looks like my two ways of mounting PBS storage as part of a migration are having some issues and it's loading. I think this is something to do with my PBS server being extremely slow, but it helps me feel the idea that there's backup issues here. So there's definitely a problem on this system, and I need to take a note of why these two chunks of storage aren't being able to be accessed here. For my three working storages on this system, I'm going to take a look at the utilization on them to make sure they don't fill all the way up and cause any issues. Taking a look at the little bar graph they have right here, I can see that HDD file and local are nearly empty, but AVME SSD is almost full. So clicking on it for more detail lets me know that I have, it looks like about 50 gigabytes free out of 250, which is about 80% full, which for me is nearing I should really start to think about adding storage on this system. The other thing I like to take a look at is the graph. Typically, I look at either a month or a year to get a better long-term view of what's going on. And I can see it's kind of been creeping up a little bit, and then I deleted some files, which freed up some space. So it looks like since my usage is slowly going up, I'm going to want to add some more storage here, but it might not be super critical. Probably within the next week, I should really add more storage to this pool, because otherwise it's getting too close for comfort, and SSDs don't like being completely full either. Moving on to the rest of the system, I can look at data center, but data center is almost all configuration, and in this video I'm going to be mostly checking on the system and not reviewing the existing configuration of the system. The one nice thing in data center is the summary tab, which can say if there's any node issues or VMs that are running or aren't running, but that's pretty much the same info we can see on the left. In order to get a better feel for resource utilization on each node, I'm going to click on the node itself and go under summary. And this is going to get me a bit of information immediately right now of what's going on in the system, as well as information over time. For the immediate information, I can see CPU usage is pretty low. Load averages are fairly low. A quick bit of additional information on load averages in Linux is that roughly 1 in load average is equivalent to fully utilizing 1 core thread on a CPU. So in this case, I have 12 CPUs, so 12 load average would be effectively fully used. But load average also adds in things like disk I/O and waiting for that sort of thing. So if this goes up abnormally, your system's waiting on something and is under heavy load. On a system like this, anything nearing double digits or over double digits would make me think the system's under pretty heavy load, and you'd either want to reduce the load or get a bigger system. I/O delay can also be a great way to see how much your system is waiting on disk I/O. Right now it's less than 1%, which means not very much. But if this shoots up, this can be a good indication that you need a faster storage solution for your VMs to work better. I can also see RAM usage on this system. RAM usage in Proxmox is unfortunately not very well shown if you're using ZFS, because ZFS likes to use a lot of storage and it just shows up as used here. So if this seems abnormally high, check what ZFS is doing in the terminal. But other than that, 80% seems perfectly fine. And I also notice I have a bit of swap on this system, which means I'm not going to be in the risk of having an out-of-memory error, killing any of my VMs. But I want to take a look at the graphs to get a feel for what's going on in this system, not just right now, but also over time. And I'm actually going to set it to year-month maximum. And maximum is going to show me the highest usage during these periods of time instead of the average, so I can kind of get a better feel for what the peaks are doing on the system instead of my average load, because I want to make sure my system still has some resources left during the peaks instead of just the average load. So taking a look at my system, I can see I did a RAM upgrade about here, and during that RAM upgrade, I can see my I/O delay shot down because I was using a lot less swap, and my CPU peaks also went down. So I can see that RAM upgrade helped quite a bit, and now that I've done the upgrade, CPU usage is peaking in the 20 to 30% range, so that's perfectly fine with fairly low I/O delay. Same with server load. After the RAM upgrade, it looks good, but before the RAM upgrade, it's getting over 10 and even much higher at some periods of time. And since I have about 12 threads on the CPU, 10's kind of my guide for it's a little bit higher than it should be on this system. Looking at network traffic, this server is also being used as a NAS, and I have a gigabit network it's using, and it's maxing out that network. This is telling me that upgrading to faster than gigabit network would likely speed some things up. But other than that, everything seems to be fine as I expect the NAS to fully utilize my network connection. Speaking about network, let's actually take a look at the network on this system next. On a basic setup like mine, I can just see it's working as I configured on this system. But the one thing you might want to take a note of is if you're using bonded network connections where a pair of connections are working together effectively as one, make sure that one of them hasn't gone offline, because that could be a potential network issue and means if the other one goes offline, the system is completely gone now. Moving on beyond that, let's go to the system log now. This is the internal system log that shows everything that's going on. And reading logs can really be an art, and there's a lot of data to try to get to. And there's a lot of things going on here. So what I'm going to notice right now is it's seeing these old PBS and PBS. So this means that my storages are offline, and I know I need to work on my backups here, and it's just telling me in a different location. Status update, PV-stat-D is getting some interesting data. And I think the PV-stat-D is the daemon that is reading the amount of storage space here, and that's also telling it. So if I want to calm this logs down, I'm going to have to get that PBS storage back online or remove it from my configuration so it can be no longer used. Speaking about backups, I will actually go back to Data Center for backups for one thing right now. And I would double check your backup configuration when you're doing a check of your system, just to make sure you didn't add any VMs that you want to backup that you forgot to add to your backup configuration, or there isn't any other problems. So I'd take a look at job detail to make sure nothing seems odd, that you're forgetting about any disks that you potentially wanted to back up on this storage here. And I think it's also a good idea to take a look at showing guests without a backup job and make sure that all these systems without a backup job, you're okay with not having any Proxmox backups of. So in case the node fails, you know those VMs are going down with it. Let's jump back to the node itself and take a look at the updates in repositories. Repositories, I also like to do a check for. to make sure that I have a Proxmox repository in here. Either the non-subscription if you don't have one, or a subscription, just to make sure Proxmox is being updated in addition to the Debian OS under the hood. I'm going to refresh the updates, which means effectively downloading what updates are available. This isn't going to touch your system under the hood at all. And then I'm going to see what all is available. Looking at this list right here seems to be quite a bit, which is telling me this system probably needs to be doing an update relatively soon. And I should probably upgrade this system clicking this button and then give it a reboot in case there's any kernel updates, because it looks like Proxmox kernel has a new version. I'm not using the firewall on this system, but if you are, checking out the firewall log is probably a good place to see. Setting up the firewall log can definitely be a complex task to make sure you have the right amount of logging going on your system, but making sure that nothing's accessing data or nothing's trying to access data that it shouldn't be might be a good idea to glance at right now. The next thing I'm going to take a look at is disks on this system. So clicking on the disks tab, I can see all the physical disks with all of their partitions. The first thing I'm going to notice is there's quite a few ZFS disks, which tells me I'm going to have to take a look at more closely at ZFS data. And then I'm going to glance over to the right under Smart Data and make sure everything says passed here. Because if a drive says it's having issues internally, you probably should replace it, because normally it's telling the truth that it doesn't want to be there too much longer. The other thing to take a note of is wear out for your SSDs. So I can take a look that I have a few SSDs here, and they're all in the low single digits, so I have nothing to worry about. But if this number is creeping up, it might mean you want to get another SSD to have on hand to replace one of these drives when they do end up hitting their maximum rated wear out. While SSDs can typically go way beyond the wear out figure, some will go read-only when hitting the maximum, and it's typically a good idea to have your drives running within their wear-out specifications. Now that I've noticed I have ZFS, I'm going to go over ZFS on the system and see all of my interestingly named ZFS pools. I'm going to immediately notice that everything's online. One thing you might want to notice and deal with is fragmentation on a ZFS pool. This is free space fragmentation, which is a little bit different than like what you'd think of on NTFS fragmentation. And also, ZFS doesn't have a built-in defragmenter, so unfortunately you can't really do anything about it. But as long as pool performance is fine, I wouldn't worry about the fragmentation number. Online means everything's working correctly, but if there is a problem, you can take a look at detail and see which one of these drives has an issue, or it'll tell you if there's data errors or what's going on with the pool that might need fixing or replacing. If you're doing any actual disk replacements or anything like that, that's likely going to have to be done in a terminal on this system. I'm going to skip over Ceph for this system because I just have a single node right now that's not using Ceph on here. But I'm going to skip over to task history on here, and this is one nice way in the web UI to see all the history here and not just the short-term history that's shown in the bottom task, but I like to look at the bottom. It's convenient to just see what's happened recently on a node like this. Diving into the terminal on this system, I can see a lot of the same information if I want using standard Linux utilities like htop and iostat right here, but I think the Proxmox interface does quite a good job of showing me usage over time. The one thing I can't easily see in the Proxmox web interface is the access log. If your Proxmox system is available to many different users, or especially the public internet, keep an eye on this log right here, and it's going to tell you who's accessing what and what they're looking at. I'm just scrolling through this quickly in less right now, and I can see everything's coming from this 192.168.1.205, which is one of my desktops. But if I go all the way down here, I can look at it at 209, and that's this computer I'm using right now for the recording. And since my system's not available to the outside internet, nothing raises a bell. But if your system's available to the outside internet, you probably want to put in something like fail to ban to make sure people aren't trying to access data. And just take a close look if anyone's accessing parts of data that they shouldn't be on this system, just to make sure you're aware of that. Hopefully this little video is a useful guide of things to check up on your Proxmox system every once in a while to make sure everything's working correctly. Let me know if you think I skipped anything in the comments below, and thanks for watching this video.